Hello there, welcome back to another episode of an epic game called FarmHold. Oh boy, it's time to do some more development. In this video, I'm going to be creating a particle system from scratch. My name's Marty, and you're probably wondering one question right now, and that's, Marty, why don't you just finish the physics system first? Well, see, if I finished my physics system, I'd have to crack out some physics books and then learn about acceleration structures, but who needs that? Why would I want to worry about all that boring junk when I can create a particle system in C++? It's not as if my physics system is running 5 times slower than Box 2D. Yeah, it is. The first thing I changed in the code was, instead of printing out the frame rate to the console like a buffoon, to instead printing the frame rate in the Windows title. Why is that useful? Well, it's because then you can actually print a whole bunch of debugging stuff in the actual console and keep the console uncluttered. It was rather simple, actually. All I had to do was change print frame rate from printing bad to print frame rate good. And just like that, bada bang, bada boom, it worked. Actually, that took me quite a bit longer than I'd like to admit. Oh well, 3 hours flushed down the drain. I got all the time in the world. With the proper frame rate counter implemented, I decided to actually begin profiling the performance of my game. So, with about 4, or maybe this is 5, yeah, that's about 5 physics objects in the game runs at an epic 5,000 frames per second. That's awesome. What's the catch, you may say then? The catch was by simply multiplying the amount of platforms by a measly little number such as 10, make that 100. The program ran like a crippled turtle with a severe case of mono. So the question immediately becomes, why is it running so terribly bad? The other question you may be saying, I thought you made your own physics engine to make it run faster than Box 2D. Okay, I can explain. The first reason that it runs so bad is I'm running it in debug mode. What's debug mode, you might say? Debug mode is basically the way you run it to actually build it. When you're actually ready to release, you run it in release mode, which optimizes the code base and makes it just run zippity zap. You'll notice immediately by just simply switching the build system from debug to release that the frame rate was increased by like 3000%. However, I don't want to just rely on setting the build system to release to actually get this to run decent on any computer. Keeping myself within the constraint of building in debug mode, at least on my computer for when I'm building it, also forces me to optimize my code in such a manner that it should be playable on most machines, or so goes the theory. So for now, release, no. Debug mode. The slow way of life. The reason it runs so slow is that this little block right here, these are actually split up into blocks. Maybe I should make that a little bigger. What do I do? My brain's gone blank. Oh, I know what I can do. Just go +1. Ooh, times 34. There we go. That would do it. One of the main issues with the code of why it runs so slow is that this block right here is colliding with the block that is way over here, and every single block that is in between. Listen here, little lump of dirt. That's a dum-dum move. Quit doing that. An acceleration structure in a physics engine essentially just makes the physics run good. Basically, you separate the world into little different nodes, or whatever you want to call them. If a node has more than a set number of objects within the node, then you subdivide it into smaller and smaller nodes, basically split the world into little chunks. If it's in chunk 1, then there's no way it's colliding with chunk 2. Boring! You're right, that is boring stuff. I'll spare you the details of that and chunk that on the back shelf for a couple of years. Days. Couple weeks, not years. It's not going to take years. Now, if I can't even get my physics system to work correctly, why would I undertake to do a particle system, which could potentially be even harder? If you're a normal person with critical thinking skills, you'd probably pass and just keep working on the physics system. But if you're a programmer, always do it. So, until further notice, let's just tone you platforms back a bit. The first bit of work I did towards developing the particle system was to find a way to intuitively generate particles. After racking my brain a bit, never a good idea, I came up with perhaps the dumbest solution I could even think of. I created a new folder, called it Particles, opened up a brand new file, set the size to be 1 pixel by 1 pixel, hit alright, and with a vicious click of the mouse, filled it in with a black color. Yep, my work was done for the day. Particle system finished. In reality, this was just the start of a very large chapter. The most robust solution I could come up with was just create a sprite for every single texture, leave it as a blank color, load the textures into the game, and based on that, particles. But as it turned out, this proved to be the better solution, as it's a lot easier to use a graphics utility to create a texture than it is to use SDL. To kick things off and get the ball rolling, I started off with a 1 by 1 pixel texture. After getting quite a few warnings from the debugger, which hopefully this doesn't break anything, I whipped up a quick little bit of code that baked up a whole bunch of tiny little physics objects. Seems to be working fine to me. Nothing at all wrong with this code. Nothing wrong at all. Yes, sir. This code, I call this code guaranteed good code. Okay. To thoroughly test the particles, I would need to implement instead of 50, 500 particles. Mama de mia. That's not working well at all. After that, I set the amount of particles to something a little bit more reasonable and created a gravity modifier variable for every single physics object that basically just says how much the gravity interacts with each object. With that done, the objects proceeded to just float in the air, although they still did have collision with the player and each other, which looks cool, but for particles, that's not at all necessary. So that's behaving a lot more like particles. They're not interacting with anything, which I think having particles that interact with each other won't be necessary for my game. That level of realism just isn't going to be necessary. Plus, it's really hard to code to make it work really efficiently. All right, that's actually looking pretty bad. That's terrible. What is that, a black line? I could draw a black line myself. I thought to myself, having to manually make all these particles, that's lame. Now with a wave of your cursor, you can just make a whole lot of particles. Wow, that frame rate just crapped the bed. You can no longer interact with them, but it's still running really terrible. Why is that? Well, but I mean, if I don't do too many particles, they run absolutely fine. What is that jitter? You're probably thinking, Marty, what on earth? Why do these things jitter like that? I don't know. Everything is fine. This is going great. There's nothing wrong at all. The code is good and clean and wholesome. The little bit of a jitter was due to some floating point arithmetic errors with, it's very bizarre. I can't explain it. Basically, certain implementations of floating point arithmetic in certain operating systems have this little error where they just print out random stuff. So like you won't get the consistent results from the same two operations. So if you go 5 plus 5, instead of getting 10 like you'd want, it just pops out 11 or something like that. That's the general idea. Not exactly how it works. That is tomorrow's job. That's Never's job. Sorry. That is Marty certified. They all jitter in unison. That is very strange. But anyways, focus. Oh, squiggle. That's 700 particles. And that's where everything just loses its mind. I hate to say it, but Box 2D was running double the amount of actual physics bodies. These don't have a body. These are just being updated by the physics engine. They don't do anything. They just move. After examining my code, I discovered there's a few culprits. These two rascals right here, integrate acceleration and then integrate velocity. Now what do those do? Well, those cycle through every single physics object in the game and then update the acceleration and then update the velocity. They're separated, which means you have to iterate through the entire list of objects twice. Why would you do that? I had no idea, so like I said, I was gonna leave that on the back burner for a very long time. I wasn't just gonna stew that can of beans. I was gonna disintegrate that can of beans by the time it got off the burner, but that's all right. It was at this point I decided it was just time to take a quick step back, and instead of bumbling through this particle system like a nincompoop, I'd actually plan things out for once. I cracked open a really old implementation of a text editor, and I wrote down a bit of a plan for the particle system. It was at this point I realized that planning is just a giant waste of time and it prevents you from actually doing anything. Why plan things out when you can be in there, in the heart and soul of your code, ticking away? So I abandoned working on the physics update for now and instead just made it so the particles delete themselves after a certain period of time. Wow, it works actually quite well. Particles were looking like what Frosted Flakes look like before they get the sugar. These guys needed a little bit of color. Should be easy enough, just replace whatever color I want. Let's go with a 0 pixels for red, 0 pixels for blue, and 255 pixel bits for green. That's not the type of color I asked for. I threw a quick little debugging statement into the code, which basically says if this function does not work, then you better have one good excuse for why it doesn't. Surface doesn't have a color key? I gotta take a closer look. Mamma mia. Luckily, I knew exactly how to solve the problem, and it was no big deal at all. In what I can only describe as a temporary lapse in judgment, I decided to rewrite the entire code in SFML. I must have been up late programming. So a lot of things in SFML are actually easier to work with than they are in SDL. SFML is more streamlined for just quick, easy, intuitive getting things to work. SDL, on the other hand, tends to work a whole lot better when you actually know OpenGL. But Marty, you know Vulkan, so why don't you know OpenGL?
Who needs that?
I once knew OpenGL. I forgot everything about OpenGL. Listen, it makes sense. I had to deallocate the memory that OpenGL was using in my mind to make room for Vulkan. I originally did use SFML, but I had this prevalent bug that I could not solve no matter what. every single frame or so, I'd run into this weird issue. Every random frame, I don't even know what it does, you'll notice there's a slight stutter. That looks fine, right? I mean, it's not that noticeable. Oh yes, it is. Once you apply camera movement to that, it just goes even worse. After realizing that the old familiar bug was still there, I snapped out of my fit of madness and realized you can't give up that easy. You gotta stick with it sometimes. Don't worry, SDL, I'll get you back. Turns out the culprit was just the way that I was loading textures. If you don't load the texture first as a surface in SDL, you can't modify the color, but you can modify the alpha value, and that makes absolutely no sense to my mind. But what did make sense to my mind was a quick old copy and paste from Stack Overflow. Dun-dun! Works like a charm. And then I realized that I made a quick little critical mistake. Another critical mistake. Wow. The command in SDL is set color mod, meaning you modify the color. It doesn't actually set the color. What does that basically mean? Well, remember when I created the texture and I made it to be a black texture? Well, when you try and modify a black texture, it just ends up still being a black texture because there's nothing to modify. Just by changing it to be the full light spectrum, and it works! It was so easy to do. It didn't take me hours at all. That's not quite the green color that I asked for, but it's working. We're getting colors. As a temporary solution, I've hard-coded in a couple constants for every single particle, which essentially just controls the lifetime of the particle, how long it stays on the screen, and how quickly it fades out. If you want particles that remain smaller, all you gotta do is just make the alpha fade out a little bit faster, or alternatively set the initial alpha value to be slightly lower. With the colors working correctly, I could begin actually implementing some proper behavior for the particles. I started by just randomly generating the position to be within range of where you click, and enabled shotgun mode so that you can make more than just one particle at once. You may be noticing that there's somewhat of a pattern with this randomness, and that's because I kind of did this slightly wrong. Yeah, I should take an angle and set the angle of where to put these to be random, but yeah, it's working. And finally, I gave the particles a little bit of an initial velocity, so now they kind of scatter around, which makes them look very professional looking. Square particles look good, but rotated square particles look even better. Wow, that looks like confetti or something. Particles! That's a lot of particles zipping around. So if you're wondering what these particles will be used for, well, they're going to be used for just about everything. Particles are a good way of just adding visual effects to the game. You can make fires with them, torches and stuff like that. They're also good for simulating splashing water and stuff like that. Ooh, if they had gravity, they could be rain too. That does look kind of like a water source actually. With a robust design, modifying the actual values of the particles would be easy as pie. From there, implementing different kinds of particles was relatively easy. After thinking a bit, I came up with a name for the particle system. I'm calling it BigBoyParticles ++. Yeah, but Marty, you're not doing anything new. There's particle systems out there like the Unity particle system. Whoa. Hold on a second. I think you're forgetting about the ++. Am I saying my particle system is better than Unity's? Yes. Just look at it. I mean, look at that. Hundreds of sprites being rendered flawlessly. If there was a Unity particle system ++, I'd probably actually use it. Listen, if there was Python ++, I would probably use it. Wait. I got an idea. I got a big brain idea. I got an idea that'll blow all my other ideas out of the water. If I randomize these little positions and then throw in a quick little modulus operator, just randomize everything, make it all look nice, and yep, and one more quick little rand function with a modulus to keep this capped under 255, and compile and run it. This should actually do something. What if I just do that? There's so much to do here, so much to play around with. Oh, okay, so just by limiting the RGB, yeah, the blue value, that actually, so that produces just a variant of green and red. I do have to say that kind of does look a little cool. I mean, that's all I got to show for this week. Stay tuned for the next video. Thank you for watching and subscribing. Be sure to code like, and I will be seeing you in the next video, right after a quick word from our sponsor, McVanBuck. Hold on a second. Gotta get my greasy salesman look. McVanBuck Trophy Mosquito is a hilarious humor book. All the critics are raving about it. It's so good that you will be doubled over laughing. That is a guarantee. Whenever you even lift the pages of the book, you'll be laughing just like that. It consists of 3 hilarious humor stories that are guaranteed to have you on belly rolls of laughter. Let's open it up and have a read. My Aunt Margot, who was on oxygen tanks to help her breathe, did not take the advice of her doctor to quit smoking, for she was a McVanBuck to the core. As Aunt Margot lit her cigarette with a match and a chuckle, she thundered out, "That old bonesaw doctor doesn't have a whit of sense. Perhaps if he was trying to take over a dead horse. Mocking the doctor's wisdom. A massive fireball roared out of that high concentration oxygen hose that was helping her to breathe, and made her lose all of her eyebrows, eyelashes, nose hair, and half a head of hair. As far as I can tell, those eyebrows never did come back. So you're probably wondering, how on earth can you get yourself a McVanBuck Trophy Mosquito? Well, I got the answer for you, my good dear friend. All you've got to do is send your full name and mailing address to codergopher@gmail.com, and you will win a free McVanBuck Trophy Mosquito. That's right, completely free, shipping included. Laughter is guaranteed.